Welcome back to the Mina Show featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast. One of the hosts thinks Charles Cross is what happens when you mix a King Charles with a Pomeranian. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. I'm trying to do player jokes that are specific to the divisions. I have mostly failed. But yes, we are here to talk about the NFC West. That voice you heard, that laugh, the queen of the NFC West. I'm calling her. She covered the Rams so well for so long, but now she is taking on a national role. So she was just in Arizona. I'm so excited to talk about this division with the great Jourdan Rodrigue. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love any and all dog references, as you know, that you can make of the great Lenny, who I feel that you have specifically architectured your entire house around. Like it's hand custom. All the steps are perfect Lenny height. You know, it's a hand built for Lenny, at least from the pictures I've seen. It looks like you really had him in mind here.
He certainly thinks so. Jourdan, I'm excited to talk about this division. I know I say that about every division, but so at the end, I didn't tell you this, but we do rank the teams and nobody remembers. But the NFC West, to me, is one of the more fascinating, this could go a number of ways divisions. It's not, I think most folks have the Rams on top repeating, but we're going to dig into it. I think that could change. I think the order of, I think these four teams could finish in any order. I'll say that right now, and I would not be shocked to say that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very wise take, and I think it's correct because honestly, you could see this is what I love about, we're really back in the glory of the NFC West, the purest form of NFC West, straight to our veins, right? Like this is real, like, oh my gosh, some of these bookended games late in the season could decide the division. Like it is so cool to have them all be as competitive as they are. I agree with you. Literally, it depends on like the mood you wake up in, what you had for breakfast, and what first practice report you read that day. That is who you pick. At the top, I would say the Rams have made it the most clear of all the teams that think they are in contention. Mina, I'm kind of workshopping like some slogans for the 2025 NFC West. You're like the queen of one-liners, so I kind of wanted to run a couple.
What do you got?
Pity laughs are accepted. I take those as currency, actually. Okay, so let's see if any of these will stick. So NFC West, we are so back, baby. Maybe, but you got to do the accent on the end. Okay, yeah, brutal. NFC West, yes, this is our actual record. We all have to play each other twice. Okay, maybe. NFC West, defense is so good, you'll forget to ask questions about all of our quarterback situations. Maybe.
Well, that one makes me think about the teams, and I'm not sure I agree. I definitely feel that way about the Seahawks. But
maybe this last one might say, are we allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah, it'll be bleeped out in audio.
Okay, great. Okay, so NFC West, watch out, Kyle had a nap.
Ooh, I like that. I like the Niners as a team to start with.
Yeah.
Because that when I say this division could go any way, this is kind of the team that is in top of mind in that regard. Can we start here? Because
100%
had an off year. They were the most injured team in football, according to FTN Fantasy's adjusted games lost. They now go into this year with some questions on the roster, some pretty significant losses, but also some pretty significant additions. They paid their quarterback, so we no longer have to debate about Brock Purdy. And they also have not just the easiest schedule in the NFC West, but according to most metrics, the easiest schedule in the NFL. So the Niners don't have to be great to win the division. And you said Kyle just had a nap. Like I had the Niners in my top 10 offenses. Let's start here.
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, there's just such an obvious floor to me. I mean, even with the unbelievable amount of injuries they suffered last season, they finished 7th in passing DVOA. I feel like that kind of
gets lost.
And Brandon Ayuk will return at some point. Christian McCaffrey is back. But again, that only adds to the variability for me, because is Christian McCaffrey all the way back? If he's even 80% of 2023 Christian McCaffrey, Jourdan, I feel pretty comfortable writing this in pen as one of the best offenses in the league again. But is he? It's there's just so many questions around this offense and what it's going to look like.
Yeah, and that's the biggest question, I think, with Christian. And then as he goes, the offense will go. This still, to me, is very much going to be, regardless of some of the questions, and there are very valid questions at receiver as well still. But this is still going to be an offense that goes as Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle go, in my opinion. And I think going back to the Brock Purdy of it all, the reason I still think that the quarterback question is prevalent for every NFC West team, and certainly still for the 49ers, we still will talk about it, right? Brock Purdy is catnip for people, right? We still will talk about it. If he struggles, we will talk about it. But at the same time, why I think the 49ers went and paid him is because Kyle, especially with this quarterback, has an extremely in-depth understanding of what both the floor and the ceiling are, not just of the quarterback, but of the team around the quarterback. And what I like to call what the 49ers are doing, the blueprint's been out a little bit. A couple of other teams, the Rams even just did this. The Buccaneers were one of the teams that were able to do this. A sprint rebuild where they establish what the Rams called them weight-bearing walls, but basically the pillars that will then lift up the rest of the roster's floor. You put them in key areas, in this case, a couple of people in their defense. Fred Warner, I would still qualify Bosa as that as well. Clearly, Kyle Shanahan thinks Brock Purdy is one of those people. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. And you place them strategically around the offense and defense and expect them to raise the rest of either the young players, the old patch and play veterans. That, to me, the fact that the 49ers know what they are this year should be a very scary thing for everybody else.
I love your point about Purdy and what he means to Kyle in this offense, because the way I view him is he is a quarterback who sets a floor with this particular coach, but then also has abilities that lift the ceiling compared to past Shanahan quarterbacks. Is Brock Purdy a top 5, 7, 10 NFL quarterback? That's debatable.
And it will be debated, Mina. Guarantee you that.
It will be debated. But he is more than good enough to make this offense a top 10 offense. And that's what matters to the team. I did say, I was really impressed by the resilience he showed last year as the pieces were crumbling around him. And there were things like that really impressed me in terms of things he did on the field and the drop back passing attack, because the Niners offense last year was very pass heavy in a way they have not been in the past. And I thought for the most part, Purdy delivered despite, not having Ayuk and CMC most notably. Just looking at his splits, one that jumped out to me, he was 4th league wide in QBR on 3rd down. And he was actually better in QBR on 3rd and long than he was in 2023. When he was pressured on 3rd down, he was 2nd in QBR to only Lamar Jackson with a QBR of 80 compared to 45 in 2023. So you could argue that even if the results on the field didn't reflect that, there were areas where he actually improved as a quarterback last season.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting. If you were going to take his 2022, 2023 Brock Purdy, Yak Bros stats, and then also, and not put a name next to him, and then you were going to put his 2025 statistics in terms of air yards per attempt, where he ranked among the top 10 in the league for most of the year. When you're looking at the 3rd and long statistics, when you're looking at the perimeter throws, when you're looking at the scramble, making things happen, extending plays, time to throw really got way longer for him as well. If you didn't put his name on that stat line in 2025, you think you're presenting 2 separate quarterbacks, right? And it's so interesting. I think that's that type of range goes back to, again, why they wanted to pay him, because they understood that they can shapeshift a little bit. They can play different types of football with this quarterback who showed that he can also be a little bit of a gamer, maybe in ways that people were a bit skeptical of when he first started.
Gamer. I like that. That's exactly what you saw from him in big moments last year. And yeah, the offense was just so different. You talked about the average depth of target going up. I mean, they were 31st in percent of yards after the catch in the NFL, which is insane for a Niners offense. But, that's what happens with the injuries. The 2 players I kind of want to talk about specifically are CMC again, and then Ayuk. So CMC not being there, it's funny because they were still a pretty decent rushing attack. But I think the thing where they really you saw them not even fall off a cliff was the efficacy of the 21 personnel, which was, just they were such a wagon in 21 personnel in 2023. We talked about it a lot on NFL Live, and they still used it at almost identical amount last year, but they went from 0.23 EPA per play when they passed out of it to 0.11. So the best to about average. And that's just a CMC stat. And he dictates so much of what they do in that thing and how difficult they make it for offenses when they have to, or defenses, pardon me, when they have to respect the threat of him in the pass game. If he is not himself, and I'm interested to see if Kyle makes adjustments in that regard, because you can't really exactly run it back to the same degree, but I don't think you can overestimate what his return means for this offense.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I was taking a look at his over the cap situation, and the guarantees, there's no more guarantees left on this contract essentially. And he is going to be, he's entering, his 30s. He's entering this time in his life where you want one more contract. You want to be okay. You want to show at least, like you said, 80% of what you can be. I still think I agree with you totally, Mina. 80% of Christian McCaffrey is still someone you very much feel okay running your offense through. And it kind of goes back to my earlier point is I very much see it. And you kind of see with some of the patience they've afforded their receivers, the way that they're playing out the Jauan Jennings situation, talking as he's at practice, although he didn't practice to start this week with a calf issue, the Brandon Ayuk commitment, but then the not going out and panicking once he did get hurt. All of these signs, if you look at it, I guess through a glass half full perspective, pointed to the two people through whom our passing attack is going to flow are Christian McCaffrey, specifically as a mismatch in the pass game, and perhaps taking a little bit off of his body in the run game, and also George Kittle, who had an outstanding year despite everything last season, future Hall of Famer. So I think that that's what you're looking at, where they can, if a receiver pops and does well, and Ricky Pearsall's having slowly returning back to action, has dealt with some injuries. They are very thin at their pure receiver position. Yeah. But yeah, I think this offense, and I think it is going to be built to maximize the dependency on Christian McCaffrey's return, specifically in the passing game.
I like what you're saying about them doing a little bit more of a committee approach in the run game. I think that they have to be thoughtful about that. Isaac Guerrero was the rookie back last year, did get some run. Yeah, I think you make a point. The passing game flows through the back, through CMC and Kittle. So there's not as much pressure on Ayuk to return to form immediately when he does return. But it's like, okay, you can lose one of them. I don't think they can afford, certainly, to, you can't, of those three guys, I don't think they can afford to lose more than one. And then the other player they can't afford to lose is, we don't even have to talk about this much, Trent Williams, who's, I think, probably the single most important player maybe on the roster. Is that a crazy take?
I don't think that's crazy because the splits, I don't have them in front of me, but the splits when he's on the field.
10th in pass block win rate when he's on, 25th last year.
Yes, thank you. It's just, it's not just that we see it on tape. It's not just that everything just functions better. It's that it's quite literally proven by advanced statistics and basic statistics alike. So yes, absolutely. So, and their line depth, again, one of the things that they've been so adamant about all spring, we're okay on the offensive line. I like our guys. They're going to let a couple guys compete on the interior. They like the center from last year. He'll get another shot to keep growing. They want some of these guys to grow together on the interior. But it's Trent Williams and Colt McKivitz on the outsides, and Trent Williams specifically being there on the left side that makes or breaks truly what the offensive plan is.
Well, the defensive plan was very clear this offseason. They said, we are tired of getting gashed on the ground for multiple years running. So you go out, you bring back Robert Saleh, which is really fascinating to me. And then in the draft, they focus heavily on defensive linemen who are stout against the run, Michael Williams was their first round draft pick, the edge out of Georgia, who I think there's question marks about what he can bring in terms of rushing the passer, or but I'm telling you, he can set an edge. He is a big dude. Alfred Collins, speaking of big dudes, is another one you bring in. Do you feel that that's going to be enough? Because it's so obviously been the thorn in this defense, even in the Super Bowl year, right? So will this help that much? I mean, it's just I'm talking about two rookies. Like, do we feel a lot better about this run defense? And the run defense, I mean, they were 23rd in DVOA last year versus the run, but there are some other metrics that were uglier, bad in the red zone, that had a lot to do with the run defense too.
Yeah, well, having Alfred Collins being healthy, working more into reps after the calf injury, he missed the spring. That will be, I think, just a crucial player / healing injury situation to watch through training camp, because, I brought up, and I know 49ers fans hate when I do this. Trust me, I hear you. I see your comments. But I bring up the Rams at the beginning of this conversation about the 49ers because it is absolutely the blueprint that the 49ers are following. And it's not the Rams blueprint. It's just what happened recently in the NFC West by their rival, right? They are basically spamming a certain area. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same position, but it's the same ethos, right? They need to stop the run better. Okay, so in the draft, they're going to go bring in players who are gifted in that area, who can also be dynamic and develop in other areas as well. They need some size. So far, reading the beat reports out of San Francisco, the size is very much there with these guys. And having Robert Saleh back, to me, was one of the most underrated moves that this team made in any part of the roster, any contract, any player, anything. Getting Robert Saleh back, to me, was one of the most important things, because that guy knows what players he wants, and that guy knows what players he needs, and that guy will fight and scratch and claw and bicker against Kyle Shanahan every single day in practice, and everybody gets better as a result. And I think that is not, it's not just the fact that he's been there and he knows how to do this, and he knows how to build the talent for his defensive line in exactly the way that fits the identity that they've lacked for the last year or so, and certainly we're looking for into this offseason. But also that, he can coach guys up. And that is what they will need from these young guys in order to actually make a difference and sort of meet the rest of the veterans on this defense, who are very talented in certain areas, where they need to be.
You mentioned that he knows which players he wants. That's a big part of the reason why I also find the Bryce Huff addition to be so fascinating. Mm-hmm. Bryce Huff, for those who, it would be easy to forget him because he barely did anything in Philadelphia last year. He was their big acquisition, but he was just not a good fit for Vic Fangio's defense, after being a very good fit for Robert Saleh's defense as a 4-down edge in New York. He is kind of like a situational, a designated pass rusher type. I think, he is not as complete perhaps as Philadelphia envisioned when they paid him. But it's possible the Niners don't need him to be complete. They just need him to get after the quarterback. And I think it's plausible that the pairing of him and Michael Williams, weirdly, like opposite Bosa, there's so many opportunities opposite Nick Bosa, who's still obviously one of the better edges in the entire NFL. I think some combination of those two players really work, particularly in Robert Saleh's defense. So I'm optimistic about the defensive line. Behind them, I have some questions.
Yeah.
Because you got injuries already. You got question marks. I think linebacker next to Fred Warner. It's D. Winters, bit of a question. Cornerback room. They brought in Trey Brown, who was cut from Seattle. But so does that mean Jourdan Rodrigue, who's a very good nickel, can still play nickel? Do they feel good about Renardo Green and defending corner ones? And then at safety, it's Jair Brown, who took a step back. Malik Mustafa, who tore his ACL in week 18. That was kind of a slept on injury. So maybe you need Jason Pinnock to play now that Hufanga's gone. A lot of questions in the back seven, Jourdan, is kind of how I came away with after looking at the depth chart.
Yeah, when I'm preparing for this show, some of my notes to myself as I sort of talk to myself as I go is like, oh my gosh, they better get to the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Like they better get to the quarterback, and around some of these running quarterbacks, they better be able to, like, I think that one of the biggest teaching points out of this wide front that they're going to play for some of these newcomers is how to then shed, detach, and then contain this running quarterback so he cannot, get the ball downfield in an explosive play against you, which is how you get gashed, even if you do play that type of front that's supposed to be able to basically suffocate the quarterback's pocket. It is interesting because Jason Pinnock, we talked about Robert Saleh knowing who he wants and knowing who he is. He is a former Saleh guy. He's played for him before, briefly. It sounds like Trey Brown, right, as we record this in camp, is actually playing a lot in the nickel. So that might mean some rotations elsewhere. It sounds like, Upton Stout, who is the young guy that they brought in, is actually competing at the nickel as well. It's basically, it's a mismatch, a mismatch of trying to find different combinations. Like, I don't think anymore, because they're so thin, and Malik Mustafa is coming back slowly from this recovery as one does. So yes, you might be having other players fill in, at least for the short period of time. So you're looking at a ton of different combinations. You're no longer looking at this secondary as people have their designated positions and that's where they play, they rotate and all of those things, but that's their spot. Instead, I think as camp continues and even maybe into the season, you're going to see a lot of combinations of players and a lot of different almost experiments with what works. You obviously would prefer to have full-time starters, but they might not have that luxury by the time the season opens.
You talked about the importance of getting pressure. Last year, when they got pressure, they were first in success rate, second in EPA per play as a defense. When they didn't get pressure, they were 30th and 29th. So the question is, can that number improve this year? A lot of it relies, I think, on it's not rookies. It's like these second year and third year players playing better under Robert Saleh, which again, I think, it's you said it. It's a massive hire. He is. I mean, Niners fans are thrilled to have him back after what's been going on the last few years with them.
I will say this, Mina, not to interrupt you, but to your point on the discrepancy between pressure and no pressure and success rate, I also would go so far as to say I don't think this team is looking to or would assert of itself that it will be back all the way to its form. It's top form in that regard. I think that they think they're going to score a crap load of points. And I think that they think that will help everything. And I think that they also think that what they need is at least a median that will improve to a high.
Holding a hair clip if you're wondering what this is. The other thing that'll help is better run defense, because if they're able, this team was not particularly good on first down.
Yeah.
If they're able to get into more second and longs, third and manageables, not giving up so much on the ground, then this pass rush, which could be good, can get after it. So, I think the emphasis on run defense was correct this offseason. I think Robert Saleh is great. I just have questions about the back end, the secondary. I think it's kind of the biggest glaring issue with this football team. So, we'll see. Like, your point about complementary football is a good one, though. I hope it was obvious that I am optimistic about the offense, more so than I am about the Seahawks offense.
Listen, I just want you to cook. Just tell me everything. It's a safe space.
I love the Seahawks defense. I could start there. I put them in my Dominique. We did top 10 defenses. I had Seattle, I think 6 or 5. Yeah. Dominique had them 3rd, which
love that.
Was spicy. Yeah. But I mean,
but I don't think it's crazy. It's spicy, but I don't think like I could see it. They are so assertive, and in the second year of this system, that's when things really come to life, and they are so they understand their identity. Reading the beat reporters up there in Seattle so far before I make the trip up there, it's so interesting to hear how self-assured the entire unit is and how talkative they are, and how they know what they're about and they know who and what they are. And I think that that's the biggest gift you can have when you're going into the second year of a complicated system where a lot of players are developing together all at once, sprinkled in with some veteran talent, is that really sense of shared identity, because defense more so certainly than offense really depends on the collective mind and sort of the hive mind of that feeling, less so even some of the, because you have to stop the flood essentially, and there will be a flood. Right, we see what these offenses are going to be capable of. I'm so excited to watch when the real football starts, what this defense can do, because you could see it at the end of the season, right? Like they started really coming along.
And the continuity, I mean, you talked about sort of year 2 with Mike Macdonald. I mentioned this, I talked about them, why I had them as a top defense and what we saw in Baltimore. But continuity is so key to that. Almost everybody is back. They're really running it back on defense. You have some additions. DeMarcus Lawrence is in, who, he's obviously not the pass rusher he was a few years ago, but you still hope in terms of setting an edge, one of the best run defending edges in like the last this generation of football. Tyrese Knight, linebacker, year 2, huge. We'll see. We can talk about Nick Emenwari a second. He was the big addition, but
making plays in practice. So I
saw he had a pick 6 of Jalen Milroe, I think, or something like that. What I love about the Emenwari addition is they don't need him.
Right.
He's like
luxury. Yes.
In this sequence. It's not like, oh God, come in here and you got to play strong safety right away, because he's got stuff to work on as a prospect. Obviously an insane athlete, one of like the best combine athletes of like last 10 years. But he takes some bad angles in the run game. He's still kind of figuring things out in coverage, even though he does have man coverage ability that's pretty unique at his size. But, I think because of the depth at safety, how good Julian Love and Kobe Bryant were last year, they can play him in dime. They can put him close to the line of scrimmage. They can use him as an agent of chaos. Byron Murphy, who was fine last year, he just didn't play as much because, again, it was like Jaron Reed was so good. You expect him to take another step forward. And then the scheme. I mean, the scheme's awesome. Like, it's so fun to watch. I was watching it a little bit the other day, just for some of the pressures that they were running and some of the chaos that they inflicted at the line of scrimmage on quarterbacks. This is a team that was 4th league-wide in unblocked pressure rate, despite being 23rd in blitz rate, which is a kind of nice combination of stats that shows you how good at Mike Macdonald is at confusing quarterbacks and offensive linemen. So yeah, I'm so high. Let me put it this way, because I don't want to just gas him up. What worries you about this defense? Like, when you look at the depth chart, is there any area of concern in your mind? Anything that you think they need to be better at? What's the one thing?
Yeah, I will preface this by saying Ernest Jones is one of my favorite players that I've ever covered when he was here in Los Angeles. And team captain, he was our good guy award winner. The beat reporters, they vote on somebody who they really admire and who's been super helpful throughout the course of the season, good, bad, whatever happens during the year, that person is always helpful and wants to explain and what's going on, and takes a lot of bullets for the team and like all of these types of things. The recovery from the knee, because obviously I believe him. He is an honest and earnest person. When he says about, I feel a lot better. I feel better than I have. And I believe him, because if that was something, and I'm not trying to speak for him, but if that was something that was kind of getting put off a little bit in making sure that he could set himself up long term and really just get settled, not moving around so much, being traded and then being traded again and all this stuff, really get in one situation and then just set himself up for his team for the future in that position and in that role. Like, I want to see it out on the field after the recovery. And so we talked about Emenwari here earlier, what I really like about the foresight that this team has. And by the way, I'm not calling Ernest Jones a weak spot. I think he was one of the best inside linebackers in the league. It's just, my question is, like, I really want to see him come back from this, and I want to see what that looks like. And we all hope, that he's healthy. And I think that I like the foresight of the Emenwari, because my theory is, yes, that inside linebackers are more important than ever, but that there's a self-awareness across the league about what outliers still are and what players' capabilities are. I think one of the best things that the Seahawks did with Ernest Jones was understand who he is as a player and where his gifts are as a tone setter, and then also what player could complement him in the future. And so to pair with that initial theory, I think more teams are trying to draft and develop these really, really big, that we saw away in the past. I know you were fans of those teams, really, really big safeties who will eventually play a very hybrid role to help in coverage when your inside linebacker is you want to keep them on the field all the time, and you want to technically play 2 linebackers, but you don't want to sacrifice your DB sub packages and you need cover players. I think we're coming back to that. Teams are starting to prepare to have that extra safety coming down and being physical to help the tone setter and the force of your defense. So my question is, will that all be ready when they need it, right? Because they'll need it. They'll face a lot of really good tight ends. They'll face a lot of different personnels that are designed to exploit your middle of your field. And how will they do that with we hope healthy, but we have to see it, Ernest Jones in the middle?
Hearing you talk about that just takes me back to Dean Buchanan with the Arizona Cardinals.
I can see your memories.
I was looking up his height and weight to compare it to Emanwari, and Emanwari's got a couple inches on Emanwari's. You'll see.
He's insane.
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
But there were teams that have executed what you're describing well, and then there's been failed experiments, and so Ernest Jones really shored up the run defense, to your point.
Yes.
He's a thumper. They still struggled versus play action. They got a little better. It was a train wreck early on, but I've been, when I talk about the Seahawks defense, you do before and after the bye, because after the bye they were like top 5 in every number, but one area where they still struggled, 22nd versus play action, 31st over the course of the entire season because they were so god awful in the beginning. I'm interested in seeing if that's something that can improve year 2 of Mike Macdonald. But otherwise, I think the other question I would have is corner opposite Reek Woolen, Josh Jobe, I think I'm saying his name right, Jobe, who cracked the starting lineup last year. Devin Witherspoon is his best playing closer to the line of scrimmage, and talk about agents of chaos. So you'd really love it if, if you had that optionality, I think, on the outside at corner. Woolen himself, such a fascinating player. He's so good in coverage and so up and down tackling, but not many concerns about this Seahawks defense. I think they're going to be awesome. Many questions about the Seahawks offense. Completely renovated. I'm going to do depth chart here because it bears.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold is QB1, backed up by Jalen Milroe and Drew Lock. The receiving group, I believe the starting trio is JSN, Cooper Kupp, Marquez Valdez-Scantling with Bobo and Torrey Horton, who they picked this year. AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo, who's a rookie, are the 2 tight ends. Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet are the backs. And the offensive line is the aforementioned Charles Cross, Gray Zabel, who's their first-round draft pick, Olu Oluwatimi at center. Competition at right guard, I have Christian Haynes written down, who was their second-round pick last year, who barely played, and then Abe Lucas. Okay, the offensive coordinator is Clint Kubiak. So when they made the big Geno trade and then they let DK walk and sign Cup and whatever, I talked about this on the pod, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. It almost felt like, to me, like they were giving too much. They were building the offense not in the image of the quarterback or the players, but in Clint Kubiak's. Like they built an offense for Clint Kubiak is how I read this. They picked Darnold because they viewed him as the best young quarterback available in free agency after trading Geno. And the thing that I expressed skepticism around was, we're really going to just count on Clint Kubiak to fix the run game and fix the offensive line? And it's like, what has he done to earn this level of investment? Do you think I'm overstating it? And what are your thoughts on Kubiak? Because I think that's where I start here. I have some skepticism about his ability as a play caller to just come in and deserve this level of investment, I suppose.
Yeah, multiple factors in New Orleans, some outside of his control, some really were, when you talk to people around the league, were the product of a inexperienced coordinator, had a cup of coffee at the role before in Minnesota, but generally pretty inexperienced in the role. And you kind of saw it also happen a year later to the Bobby Slowicks, of what are the next levels of this offense? Like, what are the counters? What are the counters? What you're starting to get solved? What is your problem solving? What are the next steps in the equation? You already do this well. What are the counter plays that come off of it? Those types of things that present problems to the coaches who are trying to defend you. Not to say that there aren't any, not to say that they don't exist, but are there enough to where on a 4-practice week during a game week, you're causing enough of a slowdown in the opponent's process, and by the caliber of players you have and by what they can do, you're causing enough of a slowdown in the opponent's process that you automatically have an advantage, as a lot of these really innovative offenses do. And I think that catches these young coordinators a lot, honestly. It caught Bobby Slowick, certainly. And I think that even in the course of a season, and again, with respect to very clear other factors going on in New Orleans as well, with the quarterback too, I think that this can sometimes catch these coordinators. So what I actually thought, this is a theory, suspicion. When you go after a guy like Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, Kevin O'Connell at the time, and a handful of assistants, and Sean McVay. But Cooper Kupp being very much in the mix in that role helped completely overhaul Sean McVay's offense in 2021 into not just something that had different answers to the tests that defenses were presenting, but behind Matthew Stafford being a different quarterback, an entirely different passing game, going to the drop back passing game, having Matthew orchestrate so much in front of him, having Matthew wanting to see the offense or the defense in front of him more than the pure back turning play action, figuring out over time how to run some of that out of the pistol. So you're still getting some of the benefits of the run fake without actually having to fully turn your back. All of these different types of things. Cooper Kupp is right there in the mix, in the office with these guys, with Jake Peetz, who, by the way, is also in Seattle, who they kept despite offensive staff turnover. And so I think that my theory is part of the reason you go get a guy like that. If you're Clint Kubiak and you have a say, which it seems like he very much does because of what other things they've brought in, that you do go out and seek a guy like that because you have to use him as a resource. You have to. And if you don't, we will see it immediately.
Yeah. I wish it was 2021. I feel a lot better about Cooper Kupp. The funny thing about the Rams example is like they're kind of doing the reverse, right? Like this was an offense that was lived in the gun, lived in empty last year. Geno was forced to just constantly, they had no run game. They did not run, Grubb would not run the ball. And so I think they're doing the opposite where they're going the other direction. They want to very much run the football. I think my question, it's very easy to say, something that I think drives me crazy is like teams fans and sometimes analysts get frustrated with teams for not running the ball and say, it's like would be the solve. The offensive line, if they weren't for it. And I don't disagree with that to an extent in Seattle. I think it put way too much onus on the offensive line to pass protect so much. You want to be a more balanced offense to help the line and then help the quarterback, obviously, and play action off of that. The Seattle was terrible in play action last year and they almost never ran it. What sometimes gets lost is you have to be able to run the ball well.
Yes.
And I think that's what happened. That was kind of Slowick's undoing, frankly, is he wanted to run this offense, but he couldn't run the ball well in Houston because the offensive line stunk. So you bring in Clint Kubiak, who in New Orleans, it was a very under center, outside zone heavy run game. This is the tree. They ran the second most outside zone in the NFL, and they were decent at it, honestly, even despite all of the injuries in New Orleans. Seattle last year was very bad at running the football from under center, negative 0.05 EPA. terrible at outside zone, 2.9 yards per carry. So it's not as simple as flipping a switch and saying, cool, we're just going to do this now. Yeah, if you run the ball on first down and you're averaging 2.9 yards per carry, all you're doing is setting up your quarterback to fail.
Yes.
So for this to work, it's not just about the commitment to the run. They have to actively be better at it. And I think that is the premise on which this entire thing rests is, can you be better at it?
And setting up to fail a quarterback that should by no means be allowed to hold on to the ball for too long. You know, like I feel like this, you're exactly right. And to that point, you know, having Ken Walker back is great. I love that for them. But having a really, really solid running back who, based on the quotes coming out of camp, is excited by and just really inspired by this offense and the run scheme and the mid zone and the wide zone and all of that. That's one thing. That's awesome. But that doesn't fix your offensive line. So I hate to say it because Seahawks fans, I know it's like you know, it's just a mental like twitch at this point, and whenever Seahawks fans' eyes collectively start twitching when I say this, but it's gonna always come back to this line.
And whether or not any of this works, can Zabel be good right away? Can Oluwatimi take a step forward? Can Christian Haynes, if he wins the job, be the guy that they drafted him to be?
Yeah.
I'd say if 2 out of 3 of those are yeses, you feel decent and can able to stay healthy. But if it's anywhere close to last year, this is DOA.
And the tea leaves say they want to get both of these tight ends involved. That's what, you know, some of the moves they made, the Fant release. Like,
thing is
yes,
exactly.
But can those guys block it well enough to help your offensive line in the short term? And this is, again, too, another reason, in my opinion, why they bring in Cooper Kupp, because there's a range of opinions about him in the passing game. I think he's still got some juice left, but I know for sure he will dig out blocks. I know for a fact that he will have one leg left on his body and one arm, and he will still be, you know, Monty Python, the Black Knight, throwing himself into the trench to grind out some of these blocks, especially where needed. And I just feel like that's a part of it, is they're basically saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, at this offensive line, what if this is not enough? Let's throw all these players and these multiple tight end sets, which we need anyway in this development of this offense. I can see they're trying to evolve it forward a little bit, but you need all of the help you can get. And then you still aren't sure because, you know, you aren't sure if the quarterback can consistently play when things go haywire.
That's a whole other piece of this. You know, I have talked a lot about Darnold, and I think the one thing you saw last year, he was playmaker against Seattle, so you'd want to see that. You know, as much as it is discussed that he's going from this incredible situation in Minnesota to a very different one in Seattle, the Minnesota offensive line was not great shakes at the end. Obviously, that played a big role in the struggles. And, you know, he at times was really good, and I really want him to succeed. I like the tight end duo a lot. I think AJ Barner was sneaky underrated last year. Elijah Arroyo is really, really fun, athletic tight end at Miami. Can bring some verticality, which they really need, you know, with ASN and Kupp as their primary receivers. So I am hopeful that the run game can improve so that Darnold is in better situations. I am skeptical, but that would be, I think, the thing that, you know, if I have to, if we're asking what makes this, best case scenario for the Seahawks, top 5 defense, you and I agree that's totally realistic. Can you get an above average offense? Because last year was slightly below average. To me, it's just, can you run the football at an above average level?
Yeah, and can you get your offense a lot of bites at the apple? Really, I think that's what Mike McDonald really likes to try to do, is almost play the probability a little bit, where, okay, you know, we're gonna have double-digit drives, and so because my defense is going to get you the ball back, and so playing the percentages, some of that has to work, right? And so I think that it's not the worst way to think about it if you know what your strength is. I do have a question for you about this, what you think about this. So obviously they're doing some of the mid zone, the wide zone. That's just the staple. And I say this in this portion to sort of set up another point when we talk about another team. Do you think, because sometimes that can take some of the pressure off your offensive linemen, especially if they can move a little bit, if they can get to different levels of the run game, if they can move laterally, like it can help alleviate some of that. Was what this was always famous for. If you could do it well, if you could do it right. Now that's the caveat. You have to do it well and you have to do it right. They could take some of the pressure off your line. But this offense and these quotes out of camp, we want to be ground and pound. We are this. We want to run the ball. That implies you want some physicality, right? When you look at this offensive line and when you look at this system overall and what it wants to be, but then also the scheme that it is going to rely on, do you believe that it matches?
I think it's funny because, like I said, they were awful at it last year, but body type wise, they're athletic. This is not like a physically imposing offensive line off the rip. I think Gray Zabel, who they drafted this year, makes sense for an outside zone heavy offense. He's just fantastic on the move. He's got tremendous feet. I think the tackles, when they're healthy, make sense. Olatuimi's not a huge dominant center. So I think looking at them, body types, some of the things they've showed in the past, it makes sense. I think I almost want to go back and rewatch some of the outside zone reps from last year because the numbers are so dismal, right? 2.9 yards per carry.
What happened here?
What was going on there? I think, the no Lucas was really bad for them. I mean, that was a really rough situation on the right side. But yeah, I think that you have to see some pretty significant development from these young offensive linemen for me to feel optimistic about it. Because they are not a group who is just going to knock people around. But it's hard to be worse than they were last year in pass pro. Okay. Let's take a quick break and come back about a team that I would actually argue is kind of like the flip of what we talked about, where I'm higher on the offense than the defense. That would be the LA Rams. All right, we're back. So the Rams, Jourdan, this is your expertise. Till recently, this is the team you covered so closely. I've been getting caught up over the last couple of weeks in anticipation of the preseason.
Yeah.
Which is a very different conversation from the one we're about to have because you're talking about guys.
You won't see any of these people.
You won't see any of the humans. I think you will see Terrence Ferguson, who's the tight end. See Josiah Stewart. We'll talk about them a little bit. But let's talk about this offense because I want to ask you a question. Do you think that the Rams, favorites to win the division? I've been doing these power rankings pods, and everybody's had them top 10-ish or higher. Nick Wright just had them 6. Do you think, because everybody's last memory is of Matthew Stafford marching down the field versus Philadelphia more than once, that they're forgetting some of the ups and downs over the season? Do you feel like maybe, or do you think this level of optimism is merited? And we can get into the reasons why.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did forget what the backstretch of that season looked like last season, 2024. We found out way after the fact that he was dealing with some ribs injuries, didn't miss practice, but it was said that it very much affected him in some of the games, especially during that backstretch of the season when they were not scoring points. Weather was a factor in that 49ers game, but it was concerning, I think. And I think that at this point, the Rams understand what having a really quality backup quarterback, first of all, is valuable when Matthew Stafford is 37 years old and has taken an absolute beating in his career and had some really serious and frankly frightening injuries over time. But I think the Rams understand also how to kind of reignite that, I actually don't feel this because the competitor is awake. Dark Matthew Stafford, darkly chaotic Matthew Stafford, as I call him, watching Jimmy G kind of carve the Seahawks defense up at times at the end of the season, drive down the field and make some throws, watching when he was being rested in that last week of the regular season. and then come out and be the guy that we all know he is, right? So I think why people are rating them so high is because we know what he is. We know what he's capable of being. The floors were high or lower with him last year than I have seen in his time since he was traded to LA.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I think, to answer my own question, I think yes. People are like, when I see Matthew Stafford ranked above Lamar on quarterback rankings, I'm like, okay, I understand. We saw him at his peak of his powers, but it was up and down. Now, in his defense, there are two things I think mitigate that. This offense was horribly injured last year, 27th in adjusted games lost. The offensive line was which we'll talk about, was a mash unit, constantly shuffling, figuring things out. Guys who I know from the preseason were playing, which is not a good thing. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua was out for several games. Tyler Higbee was their number one tight end, missed most of the season. So I think it's fair to give them some grace for the regular season in that regard. I also think the addition of Davante Adams is potentially massive for this offense. And he doesn't have to be 20, whatever his best year, 18, like Davante Adams for me to think that. It really is because so much of the attention is paid to Puka Nacua. Merely having a wide receiver 2, a traditional X like Davante, the opportunities are tremendous.
Yeah.
One thing I pulled this. So when the Rams faced man coverage, Puka Nacua was targeted on 43% of his routes, which is the highest of any receiver in the NFL. He had 3.29 yards per route run. No one else on the Rams had over 2, which is kind of the bar. They desperately needed someone else. And I think Tutu Atwell is a good player and who they signed to another 1-year deal. I think he's a contributor. But to me, again, because of the attention commanded by Nacua as well as the scheme and the quarterback, there is the potential here for Davante Adams to absolutely cook in this offense. But again, that's he's older and all of that. I'm just saying the potential is there.
They were thinking very much about what the first half of the Super Bowl back after the 2021 season, early 2022 of the fiscal year. They were really very much thinking about what that looked like in the first half with Odell Beckham Jr. and how open he was and how all of the coverages tilted toward Cooper Kupp and gave Odell so much space, and how this guy was on pace to being Super Bowl MVP, and how, okay, it's Sophie's choice. Who are you going to pick at this point? Because, okay, go ahead and try to shift coverage back away from Cooper Kupp, who had one of the best seasons by any receiver in NFL history that year. Okay, good luck to you on that. So that's what they're thinking about. They're watching Puka enter his prime, and they're going out and getting a receiver who Sean McVay has always thought very, very highly of, to the point where he's sending him videos while Davante is in Japan of Sean holding his phone up to his TV screen where there's film cut-ups and narrating said cut-ups while Kris Jenner filming his TV screen with his phone. And it's like, that's the desire that they had to bring him in and to really throw back to an iteration of that offense, but then move it forward too, because this is how I kind of see it. It's like, I think they have 2 ones. Puka and Davante, I see it as they have 2 ones. And I also see it as back when they had Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald on the same football team, which that's like, I still can't believe that. It's insane that the league let them do that. But it operated, the defense at that time operated like a solar system. Every other player, those 2 orbited around each other because Jalen was coming down into the slot at times. Aaron was moving across and around the line of scrimmage. But then also Jalen was coming down in run support and then coming back either in the slot or playing on the perimeter. They were basically these 2 figureheads in this solar system around which the entire system of defense orbited. This now will be the case for Davante Adams and Puka Nacua, who not only can line up all over the field, but I have seen it happen where Davante's in the slot and Puka is detached and out wide. Or Puka is all the way out at the perimeter, Tutu Atwell is the motion man, and Davante changes positions to make space for Tutu in the slot, and then he kicks out. There's so many different permutations. And then again, using Tutu Atwell as like the motion player to confuse defenses even more and have to account for the deepest parts of the field, everything will orbit around these two receiver ones. And that's where I think the top is. Then I think the second layer is more tight end usage. And then I think the third layer.
Is this the year that we finally see more 12 personnel?
I say it every year, Mina. I say it every year.
Trade it up for a tight end. So I feel like the Rams front office might kill Sean McVay if he doesn't actually do it this year.
You're wasting our picks if you don't.
Let me tell you, Terrence Ferguson, who I don't think I talked about in the draft, very complete tight end from Oregon, kind of good all around. I wasn't like blown away compared to some of the other tight ends who were taken earlier, but I thought he had a really complete skill set. At practice, he's a lot bigger than I thought. He's got trunks on him. Here's one thing I want to ask about the 12 personnel. This team was okay running the football. They're
not explosive. They hit doubles, not explosive. Yeah.
6th in rushing success rate, which is like down to down efficiency. 29th in 10-yard plus rushes.
Yes.
31st in percent of runs over 10 yards. So yeah, they were efficient but not explosive. They also drafted it back. Who we will
once
see
again. It's a tradition.
John. I think like when we talk about this Rams offense and whether or not they can be a top 5, 10, offense. The Adams is huge. The other thing I do want to see is maybe the offense get a little bit more explosive. And I don't know if, I guess I said 12 personnel. Realistically, I think the opportunities will be there in 11 because of what you just described, which is defense having to account for those receivers. So the hope is like, okay, we have, 2 really, really good receivers. We're going to create space for our guys underneath. The question, and this is if I had, I did the same thing with the Seahawks defense. The offensive line, already dealing with some issues. Alaric Jackson, who was their starting left tackle, came out, I think in June, that he had blood clots. Questions about the timeline, looking at the Christian Barmore timeline from last year. DJ Humphries was signed as a veteran, but that to me is the biggest question in this whole thing, is because that was really what doomed them for some of last season.
Yeah, because as we touched on in the top, the offense will go as Matthew Stafford goes, right? Really. Now, I would posit that Sean McVay doesn't necessarily want to quite be so dependent on that, understanding now what he didn't maybe earlier in his coaching career of when an offensive line falls apart, it really falls apart, which they've been through twice now, 2022, and then again last season. So I think in, again, re-signing Jimmy G, who can deploy the offense, and then also the progress they've made so far on the potential contract extension with Kyron, but then drafting another running back as well, having continuity with that, having an 11 personnel team that can flip the switch to 12 personnel as needed on a case-by-case basis, which he wanted. He wanted all of these tools and all of these different avenues and outlets just in case something was going to happen again to the offensive line, which so far it has, because that is unideal, to say the least, for Matthew Stafford. Now, Alaric is out at practice, which is a great sign. I've been hearing some positive things about his recovery and his treatment. This is something he's dealt with before in his career. But it's also like this team will not put him on the field if they don't think it's safe. And so you have DJ Humphries, who is repping at left tackle, and then you have a swing backup in Warren McClendon, who had a hard time when he was spot starting and playing last season. And then you have Rob Havenstein, by the way, who's also the right tackle, the veteran, who is recovering from a double procedure on either shoulder, where he says it was not a repair, it's a clean out, and he says his bench press is back to what he wanted it to be. But you're stepping and pressing. You're stepping and pressing, and you're absorbing force every single play. And so I think that those are the two, if I'm going to have any question about this offense at all, it starts with those bookend tackles.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. That would be the biggest question for me. A lot more questions about the defense.
I'm so excited about this group.
I was like, is everybody overrating Stafford? And I thought, well, maybe to some degree, but also there were reasons explaining. I do think, folks, their last memory of this defense is the front four wrecking havoc, and that is merited. This front four rocks. This front four got better. Behind them, I have some questions, Jourdan. This was a defense that finished 25th in DVOA versus the pass. They were better against the run. The pass defense had issues with, I talked earlier about the Niners. When they didn't get pressure, it was quite bad. They also gave up the fourth most completions of 20 plus yards in the NFL. Really struggled versus play action. So is the plan once again just that Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Braden Fisk will just be such world destroyers that will compensate for that? Or do you think it's possible that the pass defense got better in some ways and I'm underestimating them?
I think that if on paper the pass defense stayed the same. But I will say that, and I know I don't have to tell you this, but when you look at the large portion of those explosive plays, a lot of those came from missing first contact on a rush. And Jared Verse will be the first to admit this, leaving several sacks on the grass because he'd miss at first contact, and then the quarterback would scramble. Kyler Murray, I know you watched that game, killed them with this, especially.
Jared Verse, by the way, had only 4.5 sacks on 64 pressures,
yes,
which is a very terrifying combination of numbers for the league.
Yes,
because he's not going to have 4.5 sacks again next year. History suggests. So, to your point there about letting some sacks away from him.
100%. And then it's also a group that was learning how to rush together for the first time in a post-Aaron Donald world. They kept their front structures very, very simple at the start of the year. Got really fun and interesting near the back of the year. I know we'll talk about that in a second. But it's so interesting because I was talking with someone who's with the team, and basically their theory was, especially as they stay young and relatively cheap in most areas of their defense, is if their theory, and this basically is clear, people don't have to agree with it, just communicating what the theory was, that if they built the best front they possibly could, run and pass, signing Poona Ford in free agency, underrated still, and one of the best signings I think they could have possibly made to help stop the run. And if they built out this defensive front, this line, as best as they possibly could, as high as caliber as they possibly could, that would improve the secondary enough to not spend resources on it. This is a team that was in talks with Miami, was certainly open to the idea of reuniting with Jalen Ramsey, but at the same time, weren't going to shell out resources for it. Darius Williams is their highest paid player in their secondary. And in part because he is, captain material player who's bringing up a lot of the younger players. I think they're fine at safety. They have a lot of really exciting safeties, young safeties, Cam Kitchens, Jalen McCullough, who's playing a little dime linebacker as well. Quentin Lake, who's playing their star position, so that hybrid linebacker safety and a little corner, actually, slot corner as well. But I do wonder about the perimeter because it's Darius Williams and Akella Witherspoon, who, when they're good, they're very solid. But when they are dealing with injuries or when there's, like I said, covering for a really, really long time, there's been issues. Behind them is Kobe Durant, who is so exciting as a player, as a personality, but between injuries and depth rotation, all of that just hasn't quite put it together consistently. And then they brought in Emmanuel Forbes, who we still don't really know what he is or what he can be. He is wearing the white arm sleeves, which offensive linemen tell me make you look bulkier. So if you got so people keep asking me if he looks like he's gained weight, and I'm like, well, he's wearing white arm sleeves, which I hear make you look larger than you actually are. So
I saw him. So if folks have forgotten, Emmanuel Forbes was a first-round draft pick by the Washington Commanders, who was like the career pick 6 leader in college, who's got incredible closing speed, great zone eyes, great instincts. He is also my size. So, I think I liked that addition a lot because why not? It cost him nothing, but I'll be interested in seeing I think situationally he could be useful for them. I
Yes.
think the tackling is obviously a question. Look, this is the second cheapest defense in football. They're counting, I think, on the offense giving them leads. They're counting on the pass rush exploiting that. I think all of that is a totally realistic expectation.
Mm-hmm.
But the cornerback room gives me a lot of pause. Linebacker is, again, an area where they've gone pretty cheap at too.
Nate Landman in the green dot. He can tackle. I'll say that. He's a good tackler.
Yeah, and they drafted a linebacker. I think we're going to see in the preseason, Chris Paul.
Yeah.
So many NFL players who have NBA player names now.
Pooh Paul, nicknamed Pooh Paul. So I hope you have some fun with. He's a great personality, Mina. So I do hope you get to watch him a little bit in the preseason.
I don't think I was gonna say I could make some Landman jokes, but I don't think we're gonna see Landman because he's like a starter. Omar Speights was last year's preseason All-Star who earned his way, and I do like him. I think he is a really ascending player. So I hope I'm not sounding too negative. I just think this secondary, the cornerback room, gives me a lot of pause. Linebacker room gives me some pause, especially when you think about going against the likes of Philadelphia and Detroit in particular. When we're thinking about the top of the NFC, but. I mean, that verse number, like the pass rush is still going to be absolutely sick. All right, let's wrap. I do like the safeties, by the way, the young safeties.
Yeah, and if I could, I'm sorry, if you'll just indulge me real quick, you could see exactly what they're actually worried about because they're pulling two of their safeties down into that cover, like I mentioned when we were talking about Seattle, that more cover linebacker role. They're more worried about middle of the field. They're more worried about tight ends, covering tight ends, especially in the NFC West, clearly. They're more worried about helping to defend the run now because, again, the players they're pulling down closer to the line of scrimmage. Two of their best players in that young secondary are Jalen McCullough and Quentin Lake. So they're pulling them down into areas where they are more unavoidable in terms of every snap, from snap to snap. And I think that that's exactly what their strategy is we're looking first and foremost at prioritizing the pass rush and getting to the quarterback and affecting the quarterback any way we can. We added this high dollar free agent Poona Ford, who we think is going to shore up our run defense and help, and then a tackling linebacker, not really a coverage linebacker, but a tackling linebacker.
Yeah.
But we're pulling our best players in our secondary down closer to the action because that's our biggest concern. That's really what I think they're showing you.
Then you start getting worried about that explosive plays number. I think you're right.
Yeah. And completely flipping a game, as we saw early with the Cardinals, completely making a game unreachable early.
Well, you mentioned the Cardinals offense. Let's get into it. You were just there. The Cardinals offense to me is best captured in two numbers. They were 11th in offensive DVOA, so just outside the top 10. So you see that and you're like, well, why did at times it not feel better? They were second in variance. And that's your answer, folks. There were moments, the Rams game is the one that really jumps out, where they looked like absolute world beaters. Kyler playing the best football of his career. The run game as dominant as they've been last few years. Marvin Harrison Jr. went absolutely nuclear in that game, the deep crossers. And then there were games, the Seahawks, not long after that, where they just couldn't even move the ball.
Mm-hmm.
What are the Arizona Cardinals? What is this offense? Where do you regard them headed into this season?
This is one of my favorite offensive systems in the NFL, to be honest. Defensive too, but we'll get to that in a minute. But when you were talking about variance, why does this seem so strange? Why does this feel so bad? The vivid memory that you brought forth to my mind was sitting in the back seat of a car, and I ate a king size Butterfinger, the entire thing. And it was a summer day in Phoenix, and I was fine and enjoying life and feeling incredible. And I had a king size Butterfinger. And then about an hour later, I was like, I think I'm dying, maybe.
Yeah.
Why do I feel so horrible? Yeah. So this is the Cardinals, or what they were, right, last year. And I just feel like it is such a delight. It's such a treat to watch what they can do. I am so high on Drew Petzing. And, we talked about the Kubiak system when we were talking about the Seahawks and how there's this intent to stick to the outside zone and this intent to stick to the boots and the play actions off the outside zone. And that is what you do because that's what you've always done since, Father and Shanahan and all of that. What Drew Petzing said is, I am of this system, yes, but actually I'm going to run a gap scheme run game. And yes, I'm going to use my tight ends, but also somehow my timeline has intersected perfectly with these absolute freaks of players. And it's one in particular in Trey McBride, where you have a mismatch anywhere on the field. You have a math advantage anywhere on the field, including blocking in the run game. And you can design conceptually so many things out of these heavy personnel. So instead of all of your answers coming out of a wide zone, a lot of your answers come out of pure physicality, and then you can split the field however you want because you can line up your heavy personnel anywhere you want. So I love that about this offense. I have questions about the consistency of this offense. Yeah. The local media in Arizona, the biggest talking point on the radio there throughout the summer, throughout the off season, is the Kyler Murray question. Is this going to be their quarterback for the long term after this contract? Is Marvin Harrison Jr. going to take the next step forward this season? These are the two biggest questions about the offense that, again, on the ground locally, people were talking about this season. But I got to tell you, it's all there. That's the thing. Conceptually, it's all there. The Butterfinger is there.
Kyler's so frustrating because he's so hard to rank for this reason, right? Like I did the quarterback draft. We see the quarterback rankings, and there are moments where he absolutely looks like a top 10 quarterback. And then there are moments where he looks like a bottom 10. It's just all over the place. And statistically, it all evens out, right? And he ends up kind of like, when you look at most metrics, he's in that 10 to 15 range. But it is just consistency is what you need from him. You need him to be consistent on third down. You need him to be more accurate consistently throwing deep, because there are I think what's so frustrating is like there's moments where you see him do it. So it's not like impossible. There are moments where he looks like unbelievable. One thing so I'll get to Harrison Jr., who's the other player I'll talk about. One thing that makes me excited about Kyler is something Buda Baker brought up to me. I interviewed him for YouTube. Cardinals fans, go check that out. He's great. And he mentioned to me that Kyler has said to him and is also doing things in practice that suggest he really wants to run more this year. So last year, as a runner, Kyler Murray had the highest yards per carry, percentage of runs over 10 yards before contact of his entire career. I've heard him talk a little bit about feeling better this offseason coming off of the injury than he did last offseason. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we forget, like we talk about the Cardinals run game and think about how, you talked about it in depth, like they're so physical and bruising and Petzing scheme. But a big part of the reason why they're able to run the way they are is Kyler Murray.
Yeah, because he might run. Yeah.
Because, they're so good running out of the gun. And I think if he is as dynamic as ever, that's huge for this offense.
So I think I'm allowed to say this. If I don't show up to work in the coming days, the Cardinals came and took me out. But at practice, when I was watching some of their installs and all of the things that they were doing, yes, I did see more designed run. I did see more of that with Kyler. I saw that more with red zone. I saw that more. And you know what's so much fun? You and Nate Tice have brought this up a few times, and it kills me every single time. It's the best. It's just like the Monstars all around Kyler.
Yeah.
And just like this little helmet. It's a large helmet, but like from a bird's eye view, it's this little helmet just everywhere. And it's like the best. That's exactly, and the blocking is there. You can see the structure. It's, are they going to do it? And frankly, is he going to do it? Because it's there and they're installing it. They're putting it in.
Speaking of the Monstars, talk about Harrison
as
Jr.
one does.
Harrison Jr. Yeah, right. Who's jacked now.
Oh yeah, Mina. They yell 12 personnel when he comes into the huddle.
Stop.
Because that's how jacked he is. Yeah.
Wow. He's a big dude. What is he, like 6'4"? Okay. So not a bust of a rookie season, but a disappointing one, given where he was drafted, my belief in his talent level. Some of that is on him and Kyler, lack of chemistry in moments. Some of it is on Harrison Jr. himself, just, again, not playing up to what he's capable of. Some of it's on Drew Petzing. I'm just going to say it. I was not thrilled at times with how Harrison was used in this otherwise like awesome offense. Couple stats I want to read to you.
Mm-hmm.
So Harrison Jr., of all of the rookies, and there's speedsters, right? Neighbors, highest average depth of target of all the rookie receivers, 13. He led all rookies with tight window targets, in tight window targets. Again, some of that is on him. He was the isolated receiver 30% of the time. No other rookie receiver was isolated above 17%. Neighbors was 16%. It felt at times they were just lining him up outside, asking him to run a go route, and he was like a sacrificial X in this offense. And again, he is not there's his separation, all of that factors into it. But I felt like they could have done more to find ways to get him integrated into the structure of the offense instead of just asking him to take on the number one corner.
And I might push back on you a little bit on that, because in reframing this is not an offense that runs through an X receiver. It obviously runs through the tight end. It runs through Trey McBride. It's his system. He is the volume one. So it's almost like you can't even look at it that way anymore. And if you have a receiver who you need to develop eventually into being an X, and you have to find a receiver who you need a partner for him, especially when they are actually in 12 personnel, and he needs to have a running mate who can also take some of the attention off him in turn as a receiver. This guy is a young guy, right, who has admitted that at times everything was going too fast for him, and who has admitted that he needed just more time to understand kind of what was going on around him. And you have him out there and you need to use him. Okay. And I hate to say the word decoy, but at times you just need to clear space for Trey McBride. And that's what this offense was. It can't sustain like that. Let me be clear. It cannot sustain like that. That's part of the reason why, yes, they improve, but you need more from everybody, including getting Marvin Harrison Jr. as involved as you would structurally see even an offense that does run fully through the tight end. But you are creating space with him as well. That has to be part of what he does anyway. He's not the volume one. It's Trey McBride.
It's true, but he's too good for that.
He is too good. Yeah.
So I think that's where they got to find a way to.
Yes. Yeah, you need more. Yeah. You need more.
Yeah. And it's like, again, it makes sense that it runs through Trey. Trey's unbelievable. He's just one of the best tight ends in the entire NFL. He's so good at everything. But I just feel like Marvin Harrison Jr. is your second best skill player, right? So like, I anticipate the run game being as good as ever. We'll see how things balance out between Connor and Benson.
James Conner, the sneakiest 30 I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I feel like he's 25 the way he runs, 22 the way he runs.
He's had such a great he benefits from Kyler too. We were talking about it. The line, I think, will continue to be good. I think, guards may be a bit of a question, but Kyler, that's another thing I thought he deserved credit for. I thought, you saw them benefit from his presence back there in terms of his evasiveness. All right. Defense. Let's wrap with this. Buddha and I talked about this quite a bit. Insane last year. One of the craziest defenses in the NFL.
Yes.
Buddha being the centerpiece of that. A defense that used him in literally every possible way a football player can be used. But, under defensive coordinator Nick Rallis, what they were doing on any given down.
Nick Rallis, what are you on?
Some real mad scientist stuff. Crazy pressures, crazy simulated pressures.
Yeah.
In front with a mixture of a kind of Vikings-esque mixture of zone coverages on the back end, although they played a lot of 3 safety looks. In the second half of last season, this was the worst season in defense in the NFL, arguably the year before. Last year, they improved. In the second half of the season, they were just outside the top 10 in a lot of metrics. But a lot of that was because the pass defense, which we can talk about. This was not a good pass rush outside of Budda Baker. So they go out, they add Josh Sweat, who was the big edge signing, a free agency, to complement Baron Browning, Zaven Collins. Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson. You draft Walter Nolan on the defensive line. So I think my question for you is, do you think this pass rush can improve to where this defense is not just outside the top 10, but could actually jump into it?
I will say it has to, but I don't know if it can yet, because Walter Nolan's dealing with an injury,
Yes.
which is, there's no timeline on that, which is never a good sign. Jonathan Gannon is notoriously tight-lipped about injuries. You know, it's the Philly, you know, and then before that, the Steichen and, you know, all of that. But like, this is a person who will not give much on the timeline. So, but the fact that there wasn't even sort of an estimation or anything, that's concerning to me. But I will say, I was there the day after all of that happened, and you could almost see there weren't pads on yet. I've heard since pads went on, it's been even better, more impressive. You could almost see second-year player Darius Robinson, obviously more on the inside. Yeah. You could see the light go on. Like, you could really, like, Gannon had to yell at him a couple times because it was too much for no pads, right? But you could see, like, he wants it. He certainly looks the part. And then I think underrated as well, bringing Calais Campbell back too. Because this, one of the best humans of all time, by the way, but and still got it, still contributing.
Every year I do this thing where I'm like, okay, let me look at all the defensive linemen and look at their pass rush wins and their pressure. And every year I'm just like, how is Calais Campbell still, according to every advanced metric, one of the best defensive linemen in football?
Even improving certain statistics, like he got his hand on so many passes last year. It's insane. Yeah. But you know what's interesting is you could already tell there's a lot of rotation. There's a lot of stuff. I thought this Walter Nolan pick, when they did draft him, was so great for them, because he sort of represented, if you call their line right now a mix of the previous era and the new era, certainly with Calais being there as well, being back in Arizona after time away, it is a combination of the former and the new. And Walter Nolan certainly represented what was going to be the foundational part of that new. You don't have him now, right? So now you're in a mismatch of still the new and the old. And so I think that was the initial plan. So you're not necessarily having to deviate too much from the plan. You're just missing this potentially very disruptive player who would be, by the way, a perfect fit in your system. But I'm watching, you know, Zaven Collins move around a lot. You know, the rotations are still there. And it is so interesting to me, because this is a defense, you mentioned it at the top, that it's not just that they've improved statistically. They seem to know what they're supposed to do, where they're supposed to be. There was an urgency, there was a pace. Now, the injuries could be what really ends up being an issue for them.
Yeah, the Nolan injury hurts. It's such an important time for rookies. I would also add, by the way, Jordan Birch was an edge that they drafted, who's an interesting player. The good news is, I think on the back end, this has the potential to be a really strong secondary. So we already know Budda Baker is one of the best safeties in the NFL. You got him and Jalen Thompson on the inside. The corner room now, you know, again, there's some speculation here because Will Johnson is a rookie, but I thought that could be the steal of the draft in the second round. He's practicing. You know, there's concerns about the injury. Max Melton, and then Garrett Williams, who I
pretty good
already top 10 spot. So, and then, you know, if you have a better pass rush, you're not asking Budda to rush the passer as much. He doesn't have to. He can play a little bit. He was saying to me he wants to get his hands on the football a little bit more and just play more safety again. So, you know, I think that some of the issues maybe or questions up front can be mitigated to some degree by what this defense is capable of the back end, because I think the ceiling for this young secondary is really high.
Thin still. Lots of young, interesting, exciting players that they've brought in and kept around over the last couple of years who hadn't found a spot just yet. But, you know, with Starling Thomas going down, he went down the day I was there. It was really, really awful to see. He's clearly a heartbeat player for the team as well. And then SMB not being there. But that trio that you mentioned, Williams, Johnson, and Melton, law firm Esquire, like, it is actually so exciting because Williams can move. He can move around. Like Darren Urban, who does a great job at the Cardinals as a team reporter there, keeps reiterating that like he's going to be playing on the outside if he has to, and they'll put somebody else in to compete in the slot. And then when it's a 3-corner look, Will Johnson can come in on the outside and already got first team reps early in training camp. It's really exciting to me because you never want injuries. It's awful. I feel awful for the guys, but it's also like there's pure competition there, but there's already adequacy and then some there, which is exciting if you're a coach.
Yeah, this is the nice phase about where they are in rebuilding is they actually have some continuity, which was not like there's actually a few proven vets, there's vets coming in, and then you have young players. So like you said, Walter Nolan doesn't have to be the best defensive lineman on the team immediately because they used all the money that they had to add some depth. And then Josh Sweat, I think that's Josh Sweat is kind of a question for me too, because I always think of him as like being a good, not great edge. Obviously Jonathan Gannon, there's familiarity there. But I think he'll have the opportunity to get after it if the secondary plays as well as I think they're capable of. I do not know how I'm going to rank this division. I was going to wait. I like to go through all the teams first to kind of help.
I was hoping you'd forget.
I'll go first. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm ranking them on wins, like how we think it might end out. And even though I'm not sure I believe the Niners are a better team than the Seahawks and the Cardinals, I'm going to put them second behind the Rams. So I'm going to go Rams, Niners, but a lot of that has to do with the Niners facing the easiest schedule in football. So I'm just clarifying there. Then I'm going to go Seahawks, Cardinals. But I honestly, these power rankings pods, the NFC West teams outside of LA keep finishing like 17, 18, 19, Jourdan, because I don't know. I think that's where I'm going to end up, but I don't feel great about it.
Well, it's impossible. I mean, this is impossible to do. I think that, like, for me, we'll just invent something. A lateral ranking. I mean, it's not really a ranking.
Tiers.
In that case.
Tiers
lateral. Lateral. This is all. They're all.
In the one tier,
you've
got the Rams. In the second tier, you've got these 3 teams that could finish it in any order. That's how you get caught out of doing rankings, is you do a tier.
Yes, I will say, like all of these teams, like you, I think any one of these teams, this order. Listen, I'll wake up tomorrow and I'll probably hate exactly what I chose and do it completely opposite. This could go in any direction. Fans of these teams, I do not hate your team. In fact, I probably quite love your team. But yeah, I'm going to put Rams, Cardinals, 49ers, Ooh. Seahawks. And again, not because I think any of them should be last. There is no last place in my mind.
I think anyone who took the time to listen to this pod understands that we see them as being pretty competitive.
Yeah.
It's just schedule is going to be huge. I think, but
and health. That's why I put, because I wanted to put San Fran. I could easily see them winning the entire thing. Like I could see it. But at the same time, I'm so curious about the health of some of those like weight bearing walls. You know what I mean? And then LA, if Stafford's not healthy, I mean, I throw him all the way near the bottom. Well, you know,
or if Jackson is out the whole season, that really affects if CMC comes back and he looks like CMC, but if he doesn't, there's so many variables here. What is not a variable is how good Jourdan Rodrigue is at covering this league, which you are now doing the whole league. So where can folks find your work this season?
Yes. So I am so excited to be visiting in some form or fashion all 32 this year and moving forward as a senior national writer for The Athletic, covering the NFL. I also do NFL Daily 3 times a week with Greg Rosenthal. I'm in the studio right now. This is some very non-subtle marketing suggested by one Greg Rosenthal. But yeah, I'm grateful to be on with you today, Mina. I've been a fan of your show for so long, and so I really appreciate you having me.
We're lucky to have you and your expertise on today to preview this crazy division. I will be back next week to do the AFC West, and then the AFC South and the NFC South after that. So we got 3 divisions left. And for those who are wondering, so I'm doing a live show in Seattle this week. Julian Love, who you should, by the way, really talk to, Jourdan, if you get up to Seattle.
Amazing interview. One of my favorite players in the league. Yeah. Great.
I'll be interviewing him then, but I'm also with Danny Kelly and Jackson Bevins going to be doing my annual awards preview pod. That will be available the following week as a podcast on YouTube and audio for those who are not in Seattle. Majority of my listeners and want to listen to it. As always, thank you to my friends and the folks who make this possible at Omaha Productions, Kirsten Specky, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Tucker Taschen. I have my non-football pod with David Dennis Jr., Viewer Discretion. You can get that on YouTube as well, where we talk about TV and movies. We did Superman last week. This week, we are talking about Materialists and whether the rom-com is dead. So go check that out. Viewer Discretion. I'll be back next week with the AFC West. Wow!